Hello. Today I am going to be going through my assignment pretty much and doing reflection on everything. I'll try and be fast about it, but can't make any promises. I am very tired, so I'll probably be a bit slow about it. A bit. Hopefully not too slow. So, first things first, let's start with these particles, because one of the first things I created, well, the cubes. Yeah, the cubes came after. The particles, they're pretty simple. They have a velocity, they have a gravity, they have a color, and they have a size. And the gravity and the size and the I'm tired. The size and the color can be made to fade from one value to another value over time. So there's that. Also, like I said, they have velocity and they have gravity. So they can be made to shoot off, and then gravity can pull them back down, which is pretty nice. It's kind of like a fountain. And if we go down here, you can see them change over time to black and white and stuff. But yeah, they're also in this current version, they have been made to be able to billboard, which is a pretty recent change if I remember correctly. And they can also do transparency. However, it is not perfect, I will say, the transparency. It can be a bit funny, but I would say it's about as good as it's gonna get, and that's good enough for me, I would say. I don't think the transparency can be improved much more, unless I was to do some really mathematical, really advanced mathematical stuff. That would probably upset OpenGL, because it does not like doing much work. It's not a big fan of much work. But yeah, particles. They exist, they work, and they work very well. I do like how they shoot up and then they get pulled back down and just it's very nice. Other than that, I also have these particles as well. Now, I will say there is one flaw to these, just about. The one flaw is the fact that it all works on vectors. And I don't mean my 2D or 3D vectors or 4D vectors. I mean vectors as in the standard C++ vectors, which isn't exactly very good, because it means if someone wanted to, they could do something like make a particle position that only has one value, meaning it's a one-dimensional particle, or they could make a particle position that has five values, meaning it's a fifth-dimensional particle. And yeah, that's not very good. It's not supported in one or five dimensions, but it is supported in three dimensions, which is what we currently have now, and in also two dimensions. Because initially this was a 2D project. I only made it 3D like, was it 7 weeks ago? Maybe? 7 weeks excluding Easter? But yeah, so Easter is 2 weeks, so it's probably something like 8, maybe? 7, 8, no, 9. But yeah, another slightly bad thing, but not end of the world thing, is most particles operate under the basis of their texture on a 2D square plane. This is not a 2D square plane, it's a hexagonal plane, and it's not a texture. I mean, I don't want this textured anyways, I think it's fine as it is, but it's a hexagonal plane, which is bad slightly for performance, but it's not costing us much, I would say. Although in debug it can get a bit laggy. Not much, but a bit. Although it's hardly the laggiest thing in debug. That probably does a bit more lag than this particles will ever do. And speaking of that, let's go through the meshes. So first off, we have the non-object meshes. This is also one of the really earliest things I created, and I don't have much of a problem with this. I've been doing code improvement as of recently, and these work as fine as they probably will ever work. They can do textures, and they can do any kind of shape that there is a shapefile for. Currently, there is only a shapefile for cubes, so they do cubes. And they can also be made to rotate based on their size. So you may notice that some cubes rotate really fast, others rotate slightly slower, and some will probably barely rotate at all. Can I find an example of a cube that barely rotates at all? That one's not moving much. Oh, there we go. Look at that one. Look at how slow that one's turning. That one must be really huge. And yet, this one, where was it now? That one will probably seem huger. But because we know it's rotating really small, we know that this one is actually bigger without actually going over there and check, which is a nice little detail. They can also be made to so that you can control that animation. However, if you're the one controlling that animation, like I'm currently doing now, then it will no longer be a case of they rotate based on, well, size. They'll just rotate uniformly, which is really cool when you look out from afar and you just stare back at it all. Really nice to look at. So that's the cubes. Let's cover the other meshes now. So teapot. Teapot is rendered using a function I call quick draw, which is a function that renders things really fast. That's pretty much it. And this is the only object rendering using quick draw, well, minus the cubes, but they're not object meshes, they're shape meshes, and they rotate really fast because they're shape meshes. But Teapot is the only object mesh which can use quick draw because it's the only object mesh which does not have a slash in its vertex face data. Because if it has a slash in the face data, it has to use advanced draw, which is what this uses. Now, advanced draw's good, but it's not quick, and it gets a bit. It gets really slow when you like really scale this up. If you have huge meshes, it's gonna be really slow. And I would show you a demonstration of that, but unfortunately, if we do this, yeah, it's not gonna work because I don't have that file on this computer. I do have the file, it's just not on this computer because it's a uni computer and it hasn't been sent to my OneDrive. Actually, hang on, let me just. There we go. You can. You should now be able to see the what's it called, command console. Yeah, let me just adjust this so I can get it all in. Uh, okay, but you can now see the command console, and as it clearly states, it has not been able to load the model scenery. It has a code and loading file, blah blah blah, scenery. And because it has not been able to load that file, that means we cannot see the results of that file. We cannot see the scenery object, which is good because it also means that it's not going to crash. I mean, if it did not throw that error message and we tried to render the scenery object, it will crash. But I've put safeguards in place, so it won't, which is good. That's good code practice, having safeguards, having try catch. Good, good practice. But yeah, there's it can't do really big things like that mesh. I'm pretty sure the video before this will show that really well. It will be really laggy when you get to the part that shows the scenery mesh. But it can do decent things like this face well enough and maintain a good frames per second. provided, of course, you're also in release. If you enter debug and you have this, it will be still really slow, and it will come to a halt once you enable the scenery object, once you make that visible. But I do think that despite the advanced draw function being slow, it is about as best as it can be. I've checked with the teachers that there's not much I can do to improve the speed of it or how it all works. It's just that's it. That's the limit for how good it can be, and it's just not very fast. So that's pretty much my only flaws with the meshes. So we've done meshes and we've done objects. No, we've done meshes, we've done cubes and particles. What's next? We can talk about the stencils. So stencil, for those who don't know, is basically graphics black magic. I would best describe it. I've learned about stencil's existence from my time playing and making add-ons for Gmod. In fact, I've learned a lot about graphics programming from Gmod. And that's strange because you can't do graphics programming in Gmod. It does not have HTML, but I've learned a lot about it regardless. If I've only learned about it using lower functions, which are a bit laggy. But then again, parts of this project are really laggy. Nothing can be perfect in this world. It's either because of the coding language you're using, or it's just because OpenGL is not very kind to what you want to do it. But back on track, stencils are graphics black magic, and you can do all sorts of cool things with them. You can create outlines, which are really cool outlines, might I add. You can create really cool outlines. You can also do things like make something visible through walls. And you can also do something like this, where it's basically like a portal to another world. Also, although I would say this is more so a portal to another world than that one. But yeah. Or a window into another world would be a better descriptor. Yeah, a window into another world. So, when it comes to stencils, I have two, that one and this one. And this is the first one I created. And I created this one merely to figure out how to create them in OpenGL. Already know how to do them in Gmod, but that doesn't exactly translate over to OpenGL perfectly. That knowledge, should I say. There is some difference. In Gmod, you don't have to declare the mask value any more than once. In OpenGL, you have to do that a couple of times. And you also, the order you do certain things is also a bit different. But once I watched a couple of YouTube videos and got this all up and running and compared against my Gmod code a lot, because I did do a lot of looking back on my OpenGL on my Gmod code. Specifically on the Gmod code I used for that one add-on called Storage Plus and the shredder in it. The shredder in Storage Plus, if you really need to know this, is basically just an item which can shred other items that are placed in it, and items can be placed into it because it's an add-on called Storage Plus, which is a good add-on, by the way. I would highly recommend you check it out if you do play Gmod. Forgive my Gmods add-ons, how could I? I'm so bad, so devious. But yeah, I've learned about stencils before, learned about them in Gmod. That's how I know they exist, and that's why I decided to get one in working in OpenGL. Well, it isn't why I decided to get one working in OpenGL. I just wanted to try and get one working in OpenGL as a little experiment to pass the time, I guess you could say. And it works really well. It has This stencil doesn't have depth, but it doesn't really need it. It's just a bunch of lines. That one does have depth, but the catch-all clause with that one is it only has depth inside the stencil. With this one, it doesn't have step outside the stencil for the black outline things, for the black diamonds, as I call them. Why I call it white diamond stencil. The white stands for background, the diamond stands for the black parts, and then the stencil stands for stencil. That's where I got the name from. Might not be the best name for it, but any other name would probably be too long. And I'm not going to create a name that's too long. So this one was created as a test purely to figure out how to get stencils working in OpenGL the past time. I think it paid off very much because, well, although there are some depth issues with it, first off, it looks really cool when you do that. And it's also really helps show my animation capabilities in changing something over time. Because although I am only changing the color, if you pay really close attention, you may notice that it changes in waves. The color cascades from one part to another. And that's really cool. It is really cool. And it's fun to stare at for little hours. Although I shouldn't do that again. But yeah, again. What did I try to say again? I need to stop that before I do stare at it for little hours. But I did end up using the knowledge from this in creating this stencil. And I also got depth working only inside that stencil by purely just figuring some things out, slamming some code in it, see if it works, and hoping it does. Ended up, if I remember correctly, yeah, I ended up taking the GL clear depth code and putting that in the stencil. And that basically clears the depth buffer so that everything past this is essentially in a new depth buffer, which is why it renders everything over everything, because technically everything in it, because technically it's the last in the render order. As you can see, this is the last in the render order, which means it's highest in the render order, which means that without depth, this would render over everything normally. But it means we can get depth working inside of it. Well, it comes at the cost. We can get depth working inside of it, but not outside of it, putting GL clear depth in there. As for why we don't put any code in there for anything to do with depth, if we didn't do that, then everything outside would render over it, because then depths would merge and it would just result in it saying, oh yeah, I'm technically over this, or in front of this. It's not, but it will think that, because stencils, they screw up depth. And yeah, but I got depth working in this. It works well, and yeah. Lighting stencil is also a really good idea, not just because it's a good idea, it's a good idea because it can contain the light to one area, specifically the area inside the stencil. It means that I can keep everything out here working just the way it normally does, without having to worry about adding light to any of this. That's to say, I can't. I can add light to these objects, and maybe to the colliders. I'm not sure about the world plane though. I probably could. I might also have to add some sort of a texture to the world plane if I do add lighting. I might. Oh no, I won't, because it's yeah. Ignore what I just said. Yeah, as I was thinking about how the render functions work, I was wondering if there is a rendering function for adding normals, which is required if you were going to add lighting. And I remembered, oh yeah, there is a rendering function for normals without textures. Anyhow, it allows me to contain all the light into one place without having to worry about how it will affect everything outside of that place. Also, bonus, allows me to not have to worry about how lighting will affect the particles. Because normally particles should not be affected by lighting, and we don't want that. I will say, however, if you're wondering how exactly I contained it to this one place, I'm pretty sure the code for it is just GL enable light in this one section and then GL disable after the rendering of the stencil. GL disable light. Is it light? I can't remember. I did Googling for this. But yeah, it's also the same way I did some of the things for the GUI. I had to like make it so that there's no backface in the GUI. So I did GL disable backface call and then enable afterwards and all that lovely jazz. But yeah, other than that, got lighting all contained to this one area, so we don't have to worry about how it'll affect everything else. And also, because this one area is technically one single object, it's one single object that is the light instance, so it contains a bunch of pseudo objects. It means we can do something like change the time of day in it, which is really cool. It also really shows off my lighting work and how bad I am at making something look like it's going into sunset, and how bad I am at making a nighttime sky. I mean, this is bad. There is a little bit of white light coming from above. This is supposed to be from a fake moon that does not exist, but I still think it's like a bit too bright. Oh, and if you're wondering why this back wall just glows entirely green, it's mostly because that wall needs to be split up into smaller parts, but I have not done that. And that is honestly the only flaw I can think of fixing in the lighting stencil. Although, how would I fix it? That would be a question. Because if I end up fixing it, I would have to add a bunch of more vertexes, and there are already a lot of vertexes in this to begin with. Oh, it also should be mentioned that the lighting does not affect the sky. Well, the ambience of the light does affect the sky, but how other things like the green light that doesn't affect the sky, which is really nice. Oh, and also the diffuse and all that. Is it ambience? I think it's ambience. Only affects the sky. Ambience, I'm pretty sure, is like color darkness. No, it's diffuse. It's the diffuse that only affects the sky. So, light and sensor. Let's set that back today. But that's the sky. It's pretty simple. And yeah, next thing is the collider test objects. These are also incredibly simple. There's nothing in them that needs improving. They were a bit buggy beforehand, but they're fine now. The square ones were a bit buggy. What they do is they slowly walk towards each other, and then when they hit, they change the color to red, and then they'll walk through each other or move through each other, and then at the end, the animation just replays itself exactly from start. So you may notice that big cube is over there now, and now it's over here because the animation replayed. Yeah, let's just do this one again, just so that you can get a good insight. Adding suspense, and there you go. But yeah, and that covers pretty much everything apart from the menus and the GUI. So let's cover GUI. GUI, pretty simple. This shows every object that's currently in the scene, in the 3D scene, not in the 2D scene, because this is also a scene, the GUI, minus the crosshair. The crosshair is its own unique thing. But anyhow, back on point. It shows everything in the 3D scene, and it also shows their relation to everything else. So everything will have some relation to the world plane, otherwise it doesn't technically exist. And that is either a direct relation, which is represented by a solid full line, or an indirect relation, which is represented by a line with a gap. Indirect relation means that something above it, what its parent, or the parent above that, or the parent above that, will have a relation to this thing. Whereas a direct line means that I have a direct relation to the thing. That's basically the gist of it. So, for example, this particle emitter here, it has a direct relation to this, particle emitter, which has but it also has an indirect relation to this model, because this particle emitter has a direct relation to this model, and that model has a direct relation to this, which means this has an indirect relation to the world plane. If that makes any sense whatsoever. But that's the tree map, the tree hierarchy, I guess you could say. And yeah, they can also, the GUI is also really cool. It can do a lot of things. It could do buttons, but I never made buttons because I don't know what I would do with buttons. So I haven't done buttons, but I can do it. I just never made them because I don't know what I can do with them. But it should also be very clear that I can do buttons by the fact that I can also click on these, and they can change color when I highlight over them. Oh, and the clicking is also perfect. Perfect as in, if I unclick this, it doesn't unclick the controls. Or if I close that, it doesn't close the controls as well. Which you wouldn't always get in most programs, but you do get it here, because I put a lot of work into ensuring that clicking works perfectly. So I can click this, and it doesn't click this one as well, like it normally would, because it will think, ah yes, you press the button, you're holding it down for this tick, everything in this area that has been pressed, that is in this area for that tick, needs to be clicked on, and once the tree map gets clicked on, then it'll move on to the next object, which is controls, and it'll click on that as well. It doesn't do that here, which is perfect. It's beautiful. A lot of work went into making just this clicking work, and I think it's worth it. I mean, it probably isn't worth it, but I like it. I also like how this bar works as well. The bar, in case you didn't know, this area of the bar, not this area or this area, the one my mouse is currently on, is made to perfectly resize itself so that it only takes up as much space as it does from here to where this last button is. And that's important because it means that the little blue gaps, which are transparent, can be made to actually show the background without that being affected by any grayness. Yeah, is there any good place we can aim this? You kind of see it there. No, I don't think there's any good place we can aim this. Oh, there we go. Yeah, you can kind of see that that the blue gap between these two buttons is having something move in it. That's because it's transparent and blue, and because there's a cube moving around behind it. But a lot of work went into this just to make this all work perfectly, and I love it. I love every corner of it. Oh, and there is one issue though. This text, it currently takes on the same transparency as the background. That's because this is all just one image. And I don't think there's anything I can do to really solve that. Other than maybe make alpha work using the red value of the color, and then I could just like set it to blue and black and stuff. And that would work because we can only use BMPs and raw textures, and none of that contains alpha. But oh bloody hell, headphone cables. But doing that, I don't know how I would do that. Also, I don't think OpenGL would let me do that without creating a lot of lag, because it is very good at lagging. Like if I put this in debug mode, it will lag a lot. Just because of this one mesh over here where my mouse is, mostly. And because of also the scenery mesh. If the scenery mesh was enabled. Although I'm pretty sure in debug mode, if I enabled the scenery mesh, it would just freeze. It would not work at all. But yeah, controls. Yeah, capture. So last things last, let's get onto the menu. The menu has properties that can do virtually anything. I can control the rotation of the cubes, already showing you that. I can control if the mouse is free or captured. If it's free, in case you haven't been paying attention, it basically means the mouse can move around independently of the program, as in the program will not try and change the mouse position, and nothing will interact with the mouse position apart from the GUI. But nothing as in nothing will interact with it, and as in it will be attached to it. So like the camera, for example, the camera is attached to the mouse position. Move the camera left, it rotates. If I move the mouse left, it rotates the camera left, and so on and so forth. But that won't happen if you free the mouse. And manual rotate and auto rotate largely control if the cubes are rotating automatically or if they're rotating manually. The real fun is when we get into the object menu and the textures menu. If we go into the textures menu, we can replace all textures that are being used in the program with a single texture. So this one, for example. And now every texture will have that texture. But that's only the things that do have textures in the first place. If it doesn't have texture, then it won't replace. So there's that. I can also turn that off by replace texture with none. Then in objects, I can do a lot of things. It's best done in the menu over here. So I can do a lot of things. I can do deletion, recombine deletion, and every object will have a deletion object option or parameter or setting value, whatever you want to call it. Property. There we go. Every object will have a deletion property, minus the walls plane, which does not exist in this menu, because if you delete that, you basically delete the program. And if you want to do that, you can just hit the close button like that. But yeah, every object does have a deletion property, and every object, pretty much every type of object, can be interacted with here. And there are more types than others, and so it will say all of those kinds of things. But as you can see, I got a lot of options for the teapot. I can also allow rotation on the teapot, which will make it rotate like the cubes, except unlike the cubes, it will only rotate on the Y direction, so it'll basically spin around, as you can see. I can also make the particle emitters stop, and yeah, if I just go, if I take control of the rotation real quick, wrong button, and then we're gonna stop the rotation on here, and then we're gonna free my mouse. And as you can see, the particle emitters are no longer emitting particles. I can start it back up again, and then it'll start back up again. And I can do things like delete objects, and this will also update this. And what else? Oh yeah, I can change the time of day in the lighting stencil, and I've already showed you the rainbow object. I haven't showed you recombine deletion. I'll show you that. Recombine deletion basically means that this object will take everything below it, all the children, all their children, and so on and so forth, until there are no more children that can be picked, and it will move it into its parent. As for where it will move it, that depends on the object. For the teapot, it will move it ahead of everything that currently exists in the parent. So if I do this, it will move all the cubes to rotate to the top of the list and all that, instead of at the bottom, which is what would probably normally happen. But moving them to the top is good, because when past the lighting and white diamond stencil, we've done a lot of things with the Z buffer, and anything past there won't look quite as white as it should. And also, because the teapot was 1/5 in size, or half of its normal size, because it was half of its normal size, things will also get a bit bigger as well. This won't affect the speed of the cubes though, when they go back to normal rotation. As for why it won't, it's very simple. Speed of the cube is using the full cube size, whereas the rendering is using the cube size subtracted by the teapot size. So yeah. And last thing to show you is object tracking. So let's do this. Object tracking movement is not based on camera angle or anything like that. That should be noted, because if it was based on camera angle, it's not quite as easy to move around. It's a bit of a pain in the ass. Trust me, I've tried it. It is a bit of a pain in the ass. This is better and much easier. So object tracking basically means that you always look at the same object. No matter where we go, we'll always look at it. No matter how high we go or how low we go, we'll always be looking at this exact same object. And it should be noted, in case it hasn't been already, that this doesn't work with moving objects, and it only works with objects that are in direct relation of the world plane. And currently that is a lot more objects, but yeah, these objects didn't originally have that direct relation, which means they don't have that property. Also, it wouldn't work with the cubes because they're more of a collection of objects, more so than an actual object. It also doesn't work with moving objects because I couldn't be bothered. Also, because the only moving object, other than the cubes, is the object, which is technically a collection of two objects. So, there's that. If I will edit this out later just to make sure that I covered all bases and all that. Yeah, object tracking. Let's disable this now. So, as for the menu, as for everything in the menu as well, I think it's really cool. I think it's really useful, honestly. And yeah, I think it's really cool and really useful. Also, really helps to show a lot of what can be done in this project. It allows the user to do things like control textures, which is great because it will help me get marks in the CRG. Also allows the user to do things like, back to this again, to control the lighting in this, and to control a bunch of other things. Allows them to add more animation, and all of that is really good. It can help me get marks in my assignment, or more marks. And yeah, so without further ado, I suppose we can end the video by deleting everything, just so you can see the tree map update in real time. We've already, no, we haven't deleted the cubes. Like, letters. Yes, man. Also, sadly, the box doesn't resize with the contents of the box. As in, this box doesn't resize with all the objects, with all the new lines that are in it. It used to, but for some reason, the font either got bigger the less lines there were, or smaller. It was one of those, and that made it a real pain in the ass. So I just gave up on the idea and made a box that's a fixed sized. I can fit everything that exists in the scene. But yeah, that's everything. I can't really do a reflection on the scenery object because I can't show it. I would say I did put a lot of work into it, and it's really good, but the grass is a bit bad. I haven't painted the grass good, but I'm not a painter. It's decent, and it's nice to look at. I just wish it wasn't so laggy and OpenGL could handle a bit more than it currently can. But yeah. Are you okay? I'm talking to the microphone jack. It's acting up. Oh no, it's okay. Anyhow, goodbye. Hope you enjoyed this video. It's gonna be fun uploading this 40-minute video.